Hello, my name is Maria Ellie Marquez Marine, and my project this semester consisted of the target building being the Defense Logistic Agency Distribution Center in Santa Rita, Guam. The reason I chose Santa Rita was because it was an island located right near the Marina Trench, so natural hazards would be very wide, and especially with the target being in a peninsula, there was a lot of risks and vulnerability that would be identified with just that target alone. Now, the DLA distribution center is a very notable target in Santa Rita. The naval base is located right around here, and the DLA distributes surplus goods, weapon systems, and any other emergency response tools, and basically anything the military requires. The DLA here also services the Pacific Island emergency response. So if there was an earthquake in Japan, this would be a prime location to have storage facilities to advance any medical or emergency supplies needed in other islands, and it has been used as such. This location also pushes any needs that they have for the Navy and Marine Army with deployments. So this is another location where they push goods out that way. The vulnerabilities that I have identified for this location had to be kind of lowered in expectations. So Santa Rita as a whole does have tons of vulnerability, either through infrastructure not being um, paved roads, or having proper analysis to any terrain features. But with regards to the DLA, some of the vulnerabilities did not transfer over very well, and I will identify those. So, as mentioned, the Marina Trench causes a lot of activities, whether it's earthquake, tsunamis triggered by the earthquakes, or tropical cyclones that go on a yearly basis. So here is Guam, if you could tell on the left-hand side. And this was a 5.9 earthquake. As I identified how wide this earthquake was felt was this one. However, there was another earthquake here by the blue locator mark, and it also impacted here. So right about here would be the DLA. So you could just see that this is a very seismic active location. And this map was from one of my analyses where I just focused on the 5.7 magnitude earthquakes and above. Now here's Guam in this tropical cyclone back in 2002, and I got this from the website to identify just how much activity, I guess. So the reports that identified tropical activities in Guam was very few, but you could tell that the path that this took could have easily curved down. So that's why I identified the tropical cyclones being impacted to the DLA itself. And as my other section mentioned, that there was a fire outbreak, so I had routes going up to it, and I just wanted to see how far away. So this fire that started here was 15 minutes away from the DLA. And then there was another one here as well. So all this vegetation um, could easily cause a wildfire to start spreading. Around the DLA, there are some buildings and pavements, so fires would be like wildfires would be able to go up into this area, but of course there would be kind of a gap between vegetation here and the DLA. This was a mudslide. It didn't occur near the DLA, but it was in Santa Rita, Guam. Um, when I looked into my research, the soil erosion and coastal erosion was a concern, especially the DLA being on the coast. Coastal erosion could hinder the DLA's missions, or the surrounding areas would be impacted. The risk identified with mine are tsunamis, earthquakes, the 5.7 magnitude 5.7 and greater, riverine flooding, landslide, mudslide, and tropical cyclone, typhoon, and coastal erosions. And these are the five natural hazards. Next to it is what I came up with the likelihood of it. And this was regarding the DLA. So even though a lot of the Santa Rita city itself would experience a mudslide, the DLA would be lower than that because, as previously mentioned, there would be pavement around the distribution center. And then accidental or intentional fires, hazardous material spill and release, fuel resource shortage, building structure collapse, and terrorism would be the man-made hazards or threats that I identified to the DLA. As always, human consequences would be next to the economic consequence, and that was broken up into the risk matrix. And in my initial brief, I actually put that none of them reached the almost certain or extreme categories towards the DLA, but a lot of the ones in the yellow area could be mitigated with building strengthening. So I am sure that the DLA would have an idea of how to secure their building during an earthquake, but when you have a distribution center, there's a lot of moving pieces, either forklifts, customers picking up, things like that. So my assumptions were that this building that I identified, I was doing an initial review for earthquakes and things of that nature. So the mitigation steps that I provided dealt with having an evacuation plan or having a pre-warning established, a disaster supply kit for the employees, and I also mentioned in tsunamis to have the critical items either lifted up or when it came time to respond to a tsunami that it was removed off site if there was time available. Of course, a lot of this would have employees go home, hopefully, and be able to find safer location away from the coast. With the earthquake, again, assuming that it's a magnitude 5.7 and greater, we would like to have the structure stabilized and strengthened to develop an emergency action plan and seismic stability. And that also leads to the foundation of the building itself. Riverine flooding, this was actually low on my chart, but identifying where we could put K-bars and rails on the outskirts of the DLA and to ensure that the National Flood Insurance Program and policies was being adhered to, and if there was any changes to definitely put that into play. Landslide and mudslide would have terrain surveyed by a geotechnical subject matter expert. And this was because the soils in Santa Rita is prone to mudslide, so just ensuring that the foundation of the building is where it's sitting is straight and level for heavy rains coming from other hazards or vulnerabilities identified. Again, K-rail on the edges or if there are any slopes to the DLA. The tropical cyclone, typhoon, or coastal erosion was to have an emergency response plan and high wind resistance safe room. And this was actually in regarding one of FEMA's recommendation was that a safe room has to be identified if you're in one of these areas. And structural stability again, and skylight upgrades. Yes, anything that can be tied down or securely fastened would need to be, uh, especially around the distribution center. For accidental or intentional fires, the economic loss alone would be very substantial. So having a fire plan for human safety, knowing what routes to take, fire suppression system, and can get quite tricky, especially if you are housing different materials. So computers would need a different suppression system, server rooms, things like that. Conduct fire drills and have designated staffs to either take a good roll call, see who's still in the building, and be able to um, tell the emergency response what's going on. Hazardous material spills and release, and this is actually federally, you have to have some sort of plan where the materials are safeguarded and stored appropriately. So having good housekeeping practices, one, having the MSDSA available for employees, materials inventoried, know what's going on in there, and fulfill any OSHA compliance. And that's just basically don't store items 5 feet up in the air when they could easily fall down or are not safe to do so. So fuel resource shortage, the DLA does have a plan in the event that all their economic um, goods are pretty much gone, wiped. They have a material management that is kept updated real time. So units that have lost what they ordered would be able to have it fulfilled with this practice in place. So that's important for the DLA to make sure that they always have accurate record keeping. Building structure and collapse, and this is where I delve more into the stability of it. Um, Foundation stabilized, your structure stabilized, to have steel rod, carbon fiber technology, and essentially you're wanting to make sure your building is not going to collapse due to fires compromising a section of it, like um, hazardous material spills is released and there's a fire type of deal, then you want to ensure that your building isn't going to just fully engulf into flames. So definitely ensuring that any technology, any subject matter experts coming out there, visually seeing what could be implemented to mitigate or prevent the whole building going up in flames. Lastly is terrorism. The DLA does have um, agencies that can go in and have educational courses for your employees. They also have reporting protocols on base and a terrorism response plan. These are some of my references for just the mitigating portion of this. As mentioned before, there was others where the DLA does have their own response plans. It was a bit tricky to try to locate a lot of information of like monetarily how much goods they had, but easily upward over $1 million of goods is in there. There's always a constant flow of employees and customers coming in and out. So having that risk mitigated to the best of the company's capability, preventative measures taken, and of course, ensuring that the DLA can continue its mission should they have to evacuate, um, what the steps are, and things like that. So, thank you very much for listening to my presentation on one building in Santa Rita, Guam, which was the Defense Logistic Agency's distribution center.